All right, our last talk before lunch, we're going to hear from Delaware, and Eric Ludwig is going to speak on the topic of their quail focus area and the successes they have had. I really wanted to bring up that group right there with John Long, Matt Hurd, Bob Long. Tom Fisher wasn't able to make it, but to show the example of this sort of partnership happening. How are the public lands being managed with the private lands? Just to give people an idea of how you can do this in your area, see where the public lands are, start working with the public land manager and some of the people here in this room. Okay. I had a chance to visit Cedar Swamp with Quail Forever leadership earlier this year, and it was awesome. It's a beautiful spot. Eric, go ahead and introduce yourself and thank you.
Okay, I'm Eric Ludwig. I'm the Regional Wildlife Manager for Delaware Fish and Wildlife for Newcastle County. I'm managing roughly about 24,000 acres in that county for fish and wildlife. And basically I'm going to focus on one wildlife area out of the 5 wildlife areas in the county. And we're going to be working on Cedar Swamp Wildlife Area. So I'm basically going to go through the entire how we got doing our work on Cedar Swamp and what we are doing on Cedar Swamp. As you saw from previous PowerPoints today, basically everything was in decline or has been in decline and still is in decline for most of the area. We saw the same thing for Delaware. Through our quail populations and trends that we saw on even our wildlife areas, and we started wondering what we could do about this. And as we talked much about today, there's been a lot of reason for the decline in population. A lot of it has been with suburban urban growth for us in Delaware, and also, as you heard before, some changing farming and forest management practices. So from there, we ended up looking with University of Delaware, and they did a project looking throughout the entire state, basically looking at where suitable habitat was in the state for quail populations to persist, and where there was still suitable habitat that was still being managed and everything like that. That was continued, and then we also put on top of that where we started finding detections of quail, and then we basically started looking at where the presence and absence was throughout the state. We started finding areas that were possible areas that we could really focus in on management for our area and try to increase this population the best we could through habitat management. So basically we focused in on our wildlife areas throughout the state. We had a few areas, and then we ended up finding that our detection rate and habitat suitability through this modeling that was done through University of Delaware basically pinned us into the Cedar Swamp Woodland Beach wildlife management area, those 2 areas. At that time, we really didn't have a whole lot of area to the west. We now have developed a little bit more into another wildlife area, the Eagle's Nest Wildlife Management Area. So from there, we ended up taking our own data that we had in-house of where we had known locations of quail still persisting. And our biggest population at the time was Cedar Swamp Wildlife Area. So our Cedar Swamp Wildlife Area is in that circle, is probably basically in the center of that. We're kind of diverse in what habitats we had when we were starting there. Cedar Swamp is roughly 6,000 acres. It's bordered by the Delaware Bay to the east. To the west, we have a lot of agricultural lands. Directly west of it is the Route 9 corridor, if any of you are familiar. We have a lot of marshland involved with it, and when we started working on this project, we had a lot of ag involved in Cedar Swamp. So out of those 6,000 acres that encompass all of Cedar Swamp, including the marsh, about 1,800 acres of it is considered upland habitat. At the time, between our ag fields, our forest fragments, and our early successional grasslands and wildflower mixtures and stuff like that. We have a few food plots just for our hunters. This is a state wildlife area that gets hunted hard for white-tailed deer and also a lot for goose hunting. And it's one of the heaviest hunted areas for rabbits as well. We were able to do a little bit of mitigation for how many guys that we hunt. This is all run through a lottery system each day, so we can see how many people are coming out. We also had the opportunity to be able to see what's being harvested, and we also used our hunters as well to show us where they were detecting quail, where they were seeing quail, how many quail they were seeing while they were running their rabbit dogs and stuff like that. So we were able to use this area for a bunch of different reasons. One, for having the area that still had a remaining quail population, and then we had a lot of people that we could use for helping us with showing where our populations were on the landscape as well. So we ended up starting basically on Cedar Swamp, which is the map here, and with ags and a little bit of warm season grass in that brown color, a little bit of fence rows and stuff like that. Most of our fence rows at the time when we started were mainly autumn olive, and we ended up starting to move away from that. So when we started with state wildlife grants, and we started to take out some of the areas. We had some pushback from our administration and Fish and Wildlife on how much land we could take out at certain points. One of our things that we had to maintain was that we would keep some of the larger fields open for waterfowl hunting, mainly goose hunting at the time. And we had to show that there was some type of benefit to our administration before they would let us go ahead wholeheartedly and throw the whole kitchen sink kind of thing at it. So the first step we took was basically like a pilot study. We ended up taking state wildlife grants, expanding the fence rows. We ended up taking a lot of the autumn olive out and increasing it with native species. So we ended up finding quite a lot of benefits when we started taking all that autumn olive out, all our invasive species, really managing hard for invasive species and trying to incorporate our native plantings a lot more into the area. So we basically were focusing on our avian species just for a sense of how successful or not it was. And that was one of our ways that we could go back to our administration to show success during the early part of this study. So we were able to increase diversity. We were also looking at greatest conservation concern. So we were able to increase both on these, as you can see. And our quail detection started going up very quickly once we started putting habitat on the ground. So once we were able to start showing this, we were able to start looking at other areas on this area, and we ended up getting quite a bit of positive feedback from our hunters as well. They saw this work being done intensively on one part of the property, which we started on the northern side of it, and most of them wanted to know when we were going to move into other areas, other wildlife management areas, and other parts of the property. So when we went into 2014, we ended up starting to take out more ag lands and start converting into a little bit more. So this map here is showing basically the end of what I just talked about on our pilot study. So then we ended up starting to create take out more area. So we ended up stepping off our fence rows and putting them into wildflower, mixed grass. We started taking out some of the ag that was low production ag in wet areas and started putting them back into like a wet meadow or warm season grass mixes. We ended up increasing a lot of our buffers on almost all of our ag fields, as you can see the difference from what we created before to certain this time. We also put a couple of areas for food plots, just appease some of the hunters and try to take off some of the edge of the deer hunters, especially, who are saying that if we take out all the ag, the deer, we're going to have nothing to eat. So just to try to soothe some of that away, we also ended up putting some food plots in, and we also used some of our food plots for like our green breaks for when we did our fire breaks and stuff like that. So at this time, we ended up going into NBCI at the time, which is NBGI now. So we ended up putting our stuff into here, and we started looking further into where the rank was, and that basically came back to the same area as what we were working on before, and that just shows our basic bobwhite habitat potential for the state. So when we ended up going through all this, we ended up really working hard on our invasive species management. All of our fence rows basically looked like this going into Cedar Swamp. We had some wildlife using them, some avian species as well. We really put a lot of effort into controlling these. We had miles of auto-mile fence rows planted that were planted from the 70s or so. And we really went in with heavy equipment and started working with getting rid of them, along with herbicides and trying to get that under control. So we ended up going and getting another grant, and we started planting native species. We tried to start increasing the number and size of the hedgerows, because we were figuring this was going to be one of our limiting factors for being to maintain quail during the winter months, especially. So we were concerned about having that brushy shrub habitat in place as soon as possible. So that was one of the areas that we started working on right away. We started adding a step out then from the areas that we started working on the shrub habitat, and we ended up putting flowers and warm season grass, so we had some type of step down from especially our forest edges. So we have that forest edge, then the shrub, and then into our grass wildflower mix. Basically, we're doing what was talked about in the short talks. We're burning, we're disking some fields where we had some areas planted, and we're letting it grow for that quail production, and areas going through there. So our restoration, like I said before, really focused on now is that shrub habitat component, as we got some of the other stuff established. We really focused heavily on taking out some of our sweet gum. That was going to be a problem in encroaching in our fields and warm season grass area, and that allowed us to have a little bit of time between when we got them established and how long it took for the sweet gum to encroach into the time period for when we needed to burn. So then we got into about the 2017 time period, and this is where we basically started moving up further into what we were taking out. We ended up taking out quite a few more acres on the area, and started heavily working on the south side. As you can see, a lot of those areas started to fill in. We ended up basically taking about 238 acres of ag out at this point, and converting them into warm season grass. We didn't take them all out at one time because, like it was said earlier in the previous talk, we didn't have the capability to maintain and take care of all those acres at once, and establish them and keep that type of habitat going for any length of time. So we looked at basically monitoring as well. So we just ended up using NBCI surveys, And that's basically just showing you where we've been taking our points. So basically, we're looking at roughly 38 cubbies as 2019. Our last data hasn't been put into this slideshow yet, but well, I do have a point there. Up to 44 cubbies there in the fall. We do a lot more on our fall cubbies than we do on our spring, just because we're so short on personnel staff right now. We lost all our quail biologists and upland biologists in our biologist shop, so it fell onto the habitat side to also do the surveys as well. So we were focusing mainly on our cubby counts. We also used multiple reports from our e-birding sites. So does this really spell success? These were some of the expected benefits that we had, as mentioned earlier. Some of the songbirds, we had positive feedback from the deer hunters after a while, after we took a bunch of those areas out. This area is one of the highest harvested rabbit populations in Delaware, and it has been fond of the rabbit hunters as well. We also seen that increase in quail. And I know this is a quail meeting, but for us, it was a major success for our turkey populations. When I started working at this area, we basically had one gobbler on the area. Did we increase all these birds by nesting and stuff? No, not really. We drew these birds in probably from all the surrounding areas and brought them in that way, was the way we increased our population. But it really shows a drastic increase from just a little bit of management that we did. So where are we going from here? This year we just started a quail project. We're really looking at habitat use. We're in the trying to maintain current habitat. We're expanding westward into a new wildlife management area, the Eagle's Nest Wildlife Area, which we're up to about 500 acres currently now. And we're also trying to move south into the Kent County, which is Woodland Beach, and we're trying to get that area starting to work, which is about 15 years or so behind, and hopefully we can get some invasive species control and some post-successional habitat management done there. And with that, I have any questions, or we can all go watch.
Thank you, Eric.